So, the anime hero begins with introducing us to the main character, the devastated Gabimaru. He's somewhat like a local one-punch man from the village and Vagakori, where he was trained in the art of shinobi killer since childhood. There are rumors that it's because of this village that shinobi use an elixir of immortality, obtained directly from Shinshin Cure. And Gabimaru himself, with his invincibility, seems to confirm these rumors. Despite being arrested and sentenced to death, all possible execution methods were attempted on him, but he was never executed. Then we're introduced to another main character, Sajiri Yamada Seimen. She's a super elite executioner. She arrived here on a special assignment related to Gabiru, but first, she wants to unravel the mystery of his immortality. Observing him, she realizes that Gabimaru isn't immortal. He manipulates his body's abilities to outplay the executioners. Also, Kabamaru possesses ninjutsu, which he has yet to reveal. Sajiri also tells us that Gabimaru's parents were killed when he was just a baby. They were killed by Osa Johnny from the village of Vagakori because they wanted to escape from the village right after the birth of their child. Gabimaru was raised by Daionin himself, making him a true shinobi with no goals or dreams. He even doesn't mind being deprived of life. However, Sajiri notices that Gabimaru, as if doesn't want to leave this world, and is withholding something. It's also explained that Gabimaru ended up here because he was captured when trying to leave his clan. It's because Daionin highly valued Gabimaru and married his daughter Yui to him. Yui, who previously wanted to live a normal life, managed to completely change the devastated world inside, but not between Gabimaru's legs. Hence, he wanted to quit his job as a killer and live a normal life with Yui. However, to do this, he had to leave the clan. But he was set up and arrested, where he killed 20 people during the process. Knowing he couldn't defeat Sonen, Gabimaru surrendered. And now, after all these investigations, Sajiri, as agreed with the lord of these lands, began the matter. She initially tells Gabimaru that she is the executioner of the Yamada Seimen clan. They are the most skilled swordsmen and executioners of their time, honing their skills from generation to generation. Gabimaru immediately felt her mastery and realized that his body couldn't withstand her blow. And Sajiri was already planning to fulfill Gabimaru's desire and cut off his head. However, he managed to dodge instinctively, only getting his throat cut. Then, while dodging her attack, he realizes that he doesn't actually want to die. It turns out that he's kept in this world by his love for his wife. After his arrest, she was put under house arrest and hasn't spoken since, but she's still alive. Sajiri took advantage of the moment and offered Gabimaru a deal where he would have a chance to return to his wife. And she showed him a document stating an official pardon from the shogun himself. All charges against Gabimaru will be dropped. He will be under the protection of the shogunate, and his life will start anew. But in order to receive this pardon, Gabimaru will have to journey to the very depths of hell. These are the fertile lands of Shinsenko, where people have long called this place paradise, which has now turned into hell. This place is covered with greenery. Butterflies flutter everywhere, and according to legend, there is an elixir of immortality here, for which the shogunate has already sent 5 expeditions. However, no one has managed to return alive from there, except for one person whose body was adorned with flowers. Based on this, the shogun himself ordered to invite all those who are not afraid. These were criminals who had been sentenced to death, and now whoever brings this elixir to the shogun will receive a pardon. Initially learning about Maru and his abilities in the program, Sajiri came here purposefully to offer him this. After all, this is the only way for Maru to return to his wife, and then even the water prince won't be able to stop him. And in the end, Gabimaru agreed to this proposal. However, the local administration decided to follow the shogun, as he doesn't have much time left, and he has also dreamed of taking down Gabimaru all this time. So, he's not going to let him go. Based on this, Gabimaru finally decided to show Sajiri his ninjutsu, and with his masquerading flame, he ultimately defeated everyone there. After which, Sajiri said that before they set off to the island, they needed to look into a few more important places. An important event was the meeting with the shogun himself, where all the most notorious criminals of the time, sentenced to death, were gathered. But before that, we were told the story of Sajiri, where her father was the head of the clan and a first-class executioner. With one strike, he was so, as all his blows were emotionless. Sajiri, watching her father, also decided to become the same first-class executioner, at least in some clan. Executioners are generally not welcomed, and during all this, Sajiri never managed to reach her father's level and behead without emotions. Then we were taken back to the meeting with the shogun, where all the criminals were blindfolded and started to read the conditions of the shogun, where they would all be sent to the island for the elixir of immortality, and whoever brings it will receive a pardon from the shogun. The guards of this event were members of the Seimen clan, as well as the shogunate warriors. After that, everyone's masks were removed, and they showed the only person who returned from there, who now looked more like plants. The criminals immediately began to protest that they were not going to die. However, Aizen explained with the severed head that they had no choice, because if they did not go to the island, then they would be deprived of life right now. After that, it was explained to the criminals that each of them on the island would be presented with overseers from the Simon clan, and if the convicts try to escape or deceive, they will immediately lose their heads, and also if their overseer dies, then they will not see any pardon. Well, the most important thing is that the number of overseers is limited, and the capacity of the ship to the island is also limited. The criminals themselves must thin out the food. The strongest will swim there. Based on this, a real massacre began, where Kapamaru sat peacefully on the sidelines all this time. It turns out that he and a few other criminals were highlighted in red as possessing special skills. At the same time, Aizen tried to convince Sajiri that she didn't need to sail to the island. Well, first of all, she's a girl, and secondly, it's too dangerous. But Sajiri wasn't going to retreat. She was only worried about one thing, whether she could, if necessary, decapitate Gabimaru without emotions. Meanwhile, observing this skirmish, Gabimaru turned directly to the shogunate and asked if the selection could be conducted more peacefully, but they just laughed at him and set a gain of thefts on him. And then the devastated Gabimaru himself joined the fray, where he, in just a couple of seconds, with bare hands, so to speak, tore these criminals apart, and everyone was shocked at how skillful a killer he was. As a result, among all the criminals, the strongest remained, among whom were the king of bandits Sotsado Bey, the dragon blade Tamiyaganti, the 100 hunter Susai, the praying killer Narugai, the runaway shinobi Horaba, the devastated Gabimaru courtesan, as well as Skinkyu Nayutsu Raha, the renegade Mor Omakia, the giant Rokoroda, and the mad Kain. Then they loaded everyone onto the ship and took them to the island of Shinsengyu, where they divided everyone into pairs, a criminal plus an executioner, and the criminals were forbidden to untie their hands. Then, already on the shore, Gabimaru said that he believed that the elixir really existed because he remembered that the head of the village and the Vakakiri were immortal, and Gabimaru would find this elixir at all costs to get a pardon and see his wife. After that, they went into the depths of the island, where Gabimaru immediately noticed that it was a far from friendly place. He even untied his hands right away, but Sajiri, threatening him with death, made him tie them up again. And just then, the mad Kion attacked Gabimaru. He thought he had knocked down Argagashka with the very first blow, but he used his shinobi techniques and didn't even feel his blow. It also turned out that Kion's hands were untied, and Gabimaru tried to convey to Sajiri that untied hands on this island were a forced necessity, but Sajiri stood her ground. Based on this situation, Gabimaru switched to Kion, and with his own weapon smashed him. After the dead Kion, from the bottom of his heart, Kishua Simon was glad that he managed to get off this island so quickly, and he, along with Kane's head, headed to the shore. Furthermore, he also mentioned before that he had seen how other criminals had tried to ambush other participants or their executioners. Therefore, Kishik suggested that Sajiri immediately decapitate Gabimaru and then flee from this island. But our geezer interrupted him, where Kishik, to spite Gabimaru, said that he had heard that the shogunate had also turned to the village and Vagakuri for help, and most likely they would also arrive here soon. Their paths then diverged, and Gabimaru, learning about Ibakaru, realized that he now had limited time. After Kishim left, he immediately attacked Sajiri. It turned out that Gabimaru had changed his priorities upon hearing about the possible arrival of the Agakuri. After all, if they were to arrive here, Gabimaru would have no chance of getting the elixir. However, for some reason, he knew that he could take down Sajiri with just one blow. Subconsciously, he couldn't bring himself to do it. The same was true for Sajiri, who understood that she needed to execute Gabina. Deep down, she seemed to not want to do this. In the process, Gabimaru remembered the words of his wife, who told him to listen to himself and act. We can see his heart, for he is no longer the desolate Gabimaru he once was. In short, the battle between Sajiri and Gabimaru turned into their battle with themselves and their changes for the better. However, after Gabimaru remembered Den-In's words about how if he were weak, he wouldn't be able to protect anyone, he broke Sajiri's sword with the next blow. Then he sat on top of her. However, he couldn't bring himself to finish her off. His love for his wife overcame Den-In's upbringing. Sajiri, of course, was shocked that such a fierce killer like him hesitated, and she realized that although she called him desolate, he was actually a person with inner struggles. Looking at him, she seemed to see her own emotions inside him. And she explained to him that what was happening to Gabimaru now was not weakness, but the first manifestation of strength. Only a strong person can face their emotions head-on. This is what he and his wife said. Finally, Sajiri understood her feelings inside, and she decided to change her approach. And for now, let's turn a blind eye to what Gabimaru has done. In parallel with this, we were shown how the giant rock rode immediately after the Cinnamon Island and ate his executioner, Aizen. And now the hungry giant has gone hunting. We were also shown how Youve tore apart a monk who was trying to knock him over even on the boats. And it turns out that Tabea's overseer will be his brother, Toma. We were also shown the path of the dragon blade Gontelsusai and his executioner, where they walking on the island saw items that were clearly made by people. And right after that, Gontelsusai was bitten by a butterfly with a human face, and he, remembering the person with flowers, immediately cut off his hand to stop the spread of poison. And he was right, his hand immediately covered with flowers. After that, centipedes with hands instead of teeth began to appear, and a whole swarm of butterflies appeared. And then gigantic monsters appeared with which they started to fight. But before all this, we were shown the story of Gontelsusai, where it turns out he began to be called the Dragon Blade for cutting the arc with the dragon at the Bolster Otsumi. Because of this, Gontelsusai was arrested and sentenced to death. He told everything to Fute, who, in turn, explained to the health worker that the Simon clan are not just executioners. They are sword testers. They are engaged in pharmacology. They perform autopsies on people, and they make discoveries in medicine. In short, Fute wants to study the local inhabitants here, and Gontetsusai wants to find strong opponents and make his name immortal. Then we were transferred back to the Gagashkas, near which monsters also began to appear, which Gabimaru decided to take on himself, where he immediately remembered the fifth rule of Denin, not to fight with an opponent about whom he knows nothing. But while he was thinking about all this, a fish monster grabbed him and threw him to the ground. In connection with this, Gabimaru said sit down, they need to retreat to gather information about the enemy. However, it turned out that the monsters were everywhere. And then Gabimaru decided to deal with them. With his ascetic flame, he, on emotions, began to break up monsters and save Sajiri in parallel. And then the shinobi Zarik and two executioners within Taijinji appeared. Yujiri, he turns out Gabimaru liked it. After all, they are both shinobi, so she wants to join forces with him. But Kamaru immediately realized that Izurika was trying to play him. And it turned out that she had two executioners with her because she had previously poisoned the criminal Oroki and fed him to rock rot. So his executioner, Jin, understood that one executioner couldn't handle this trickery. He went with them a lot of Bimaru. And Sagiris immediately deciphered the secret that Izurika simply seduced these executioners. So they go after her. However, they were not against joining forces as a team, all for the sake of finding the elixir, where Yuzuri exchanges information for Gabimaru's abilities. She said that thanks to Muro Makes Death, she learned that the most dangerous here are not giant monsters, but butterflies, from the bite of which one can turn into plants. Pollen on their wings causes hallucinations, but millipedes are not dangerous at all, they're just scavengers. Sento added to this, as a connoisseur of various religions, that here the monsters carry various items of Buddhist and Taoist origin. And this is very strange because these religions are very different from each other. Izurika's main goal is simply to survive because she doesn't want to die young. Kabamaru, having listened to all this, said that they would fight together, but he wouldn't consider them a team. And while our gang stopped to rest, we were shown Adze and his brother, the executioner Thomas. It turned out that he became one just a month ago, all to save his brother, who was boiled to death. Where the journey for the elixir was part of the plan to save Tabi. They, like others, encountered monsters, which they began to cut up. And it turned out that the main strength of Tabi is super fast adaptability to everything. He has been like this in childhood, where he even sacrificed his eye to protect his brother and scare off the thugs. And not so long ago, to save his brother, he allowed himself to be arrested, asking his brother to release him from prison, which Tom did in the end. In connection with this, the brothers began to break through the monsters, some of which can communicate with quotes from Contact Today. Immediately explained to his brother that since there are these monsters here, then there will be a place for a magical elixir here. Therefore, their plan is to scatter all the criminals and monsters on their way so that no one interferes with them reaching the elixir. In the process of this, Tabi began to eat monsters to replenish his strength. Then we were returned back to her shelter for relaxation, where Sajiri remembered in a dream how her father looked at her with contempt and disappointment. After all, in his opinion, a woman cannot lead the Yamada Simon clan. Moreover, since Sajiri was the daughter of an executioner, society also despised her. Oleshigiri came to her senses because it turns out she passed out from being poisoned by pollen and butterflies. She immediately checked where Gabamaru was, but he was preparing food from everything he found nearby. It turns out he surveyed the surroundings. However, he noticed that exactly the same plants grow here as on the mainland. He also encountered those same flowers that grew on that survivor, and he assumes that the plants that exist on the island were once people. And Sin even explained to everyone that he is greatly concerned about the statue made from various religions, which are very strangely intertwined, as if it was all created by a mentally ill person. And the creatures, in his opinion, resemble some experiments. After that, Genji reached out to Jiri for a conversation, as is customary in the Simon clan. Sajiri to return because it's too dangerous for a woman here. Sento also joined the conversation and said that he doesn't want her to leave because she can still influence Gabimaru, and that's very useful at the moment. And Sage said she would think about it. Then night fell, where Gabimaru explained to Jiri that he is not going to run away. He just wants to get the elixir, see his wife, plus it's all training before the Ivano Curians arrive here. After that, in the morning, Sagiri thanked Genju for his concern. However, she decided to stay here and finish what she started. She also doesn't like that Genji doesn't perceive her as a samurai, which she actually is. In short, she wants to live her life as she wants. Genji disagreed with her opinion, was already going to draw his sword, but Sagiri didn't let him. However, immediately after that, behind their backs, that same giant Trakuroda appeared, who with one movement tore off part of Genji's body, threw him a couple of dozen meters away. Mortally wounded, Genji said for Sagiri to run away from here, because he can't help her anymore. And while this was all being discussed, Health already wanted to knock down Sagiri, but Gabimaru appeared and struck Health in the head. As a result, our murder machine started fighting, and where it turned out that this giant is super strong, super tough. Gabimaru's attacks couldn't pierce him. Izuri Hazen watched their battle, but they decided not to intervene. Then Gabimaru used all his fighting potential on Health, but he didn't feel any of it. Also at this time, Sajiri tried to save him, but he stopped her and said that he can't help her anymore. He also said that he understood why Sajiri chose this path. He handed her his sword and said that together with it he transfers to her the soul of the Simon clan. And in the end, he confessed to Jiri as a samurai, and he wants her to knock down this disgusting giant who was accompanied by Ison. So the giant knocked him down, and Sajiri must punish him for this. Based on this, Sajiri, full of motivation, immediately with the first blow managed to cut off Health's finger, and he started crying like a little boy. Our gangsters at that time came up with a plan, where Gabimaru will have to bend his arm. Rodo should be able to reach his neck. However, the giant's stomach growled. He, grabbing Gabimaru, forcefully planted him into the ground. Here, our little buddy took a significant amount of damage, and now he couldn't stand up for himself. Sajiri stepped in. Having cast aside her emotions, she managed to fight on equal terms with the Health guy. Roughly speaking, she began to turn her feelings into strength. And also, while all this was happening, Enten explained about the ranking system in the Simon clan, where the higher the rank of the samurai, the higher the chance of becoming the clan leader. Sajiri was last on this list. If you look at swordsmanship mastery, she's definitely at the top of this list, but even that didn't allow her to decapitate the giant because he was too agile. And then Gabimaru joined the fight. He lit a forest fire to use smoke and growth to force Health guy to bow his head. It all worked, and in the end, Sajiri deprived him of his life. And we were explained that since childhood, Rockurt has been devouring everyone and everything. He couldn't understand why he couldn't get enough to eat. And he also had a dream of playing with someone, but of course, everyone just hated him. Now Sajiri made sure that no one else would hate him, and as a result, the bodies of the Health guy and Genji burned in the forest fire. Next, they encountered another group of monsters who followed strange instincts, like fire, and our little Gagashkas decided to go to the place they came from. There they met Center and Zurich, who discovered a village hidden in the fog. According to legend, it used to be a village of hermit mages who, supposedly, unexpectedly sucked each other. They met Toma and Tobei, who were 10 Sinise Tofa, where the latter turned into a man and easily defeated Toma, throwing all their still-living bodies into a pit where there were many half-dead bodies with flowers. And there, Toma, we had to turn into a so-called tank, which these 10 Sinise feed on. At the same time, our little Gagashkas decided to descend into the village and look for someone there, but Gabimaru noticed a girl watching them, and he decided to catch up with her because she might know something about the elixir. However, this girl possessed some unseen force that pierced through, and on top of that, she was being protected by the appearing local wooden ground Hoko. After this chase, Gabimaru managed to catch the girl, whom Sagiri calmed down, and Hoku told them that they were not enemies. If they returned the girl to him, he would tell them everything he knew about the elixir. Then they descended into the village, where 1,000 years ago, it turns out, a tribe of long livers lived. There, they, seeing hot baths, couldn't resist, and Hoku fed them there as well. After that, they started to find out what connects Hoku and this girl, but the wooden one refused to answer this question. He just said that they were now in the places of Kotoko or Shinginku, the abode of the gods. Their loco said that according to legend, in Serbi, there is death, but still, it exists. Here, they call it the tank. Then Hoku told that conditionally this island is divided into rings, where this village is located on the second circle. In the center of the island, everything is covered in fog. And there is Youve, where the Tensins live, who control those very monsters, Sashins. Tensins are considered the highest form of life, and Hoku is sure that ordinary people cannot defeat them. It is precisely the Tensin that kills everyone who stays here to turn them into a tank, which gives them eternal bliss. And Hoku himself once received part of the tank's blessing, so he has regeneration. He also said that the girl is called Mei. She was born and raised on this island many centuries ago. Hoku himself wants a peaceful life, so he tells people the whole truth, as this is most likely the last thing they will hear. Then our go-go split into two and went to take baths, where, finding everything needed for cosmetic procedures in the bath, Sajiri turned on the hot water and began to bathe Mei, who had a gigantic scar across her entire back. This scar reminded him of his wife, Youve, who had a scar on her face. Her father, Osa, left it for her because Yuri wanted to live a normal life. Then Gabimaru said, marry, so she doesn't hide her scar. And for him, the main thing is not external beauty, but internal. And the wife was very pleased with Gabimaru's words, the same thing he said about her scar. After that, he said he didn't have time to sit around here. He needed to save his wife. Well, then, after the evening discussion that they still hadn't found anything, the one keeping an eye on Gabimaru, Senda, fell asleep and he decided to go solo to the temple to find the elixir. Also, in the meantime, they showed us the story of Naruga and Tenzo Simon's journey, where Tenzo, firstly, thought Naruga was a boy. Secondly, he believes that Naruga deserves to be free because, essentially, Naruga is a child who was sentenced to death for a village of defectors, where she lived her life in the mountains, ignoring Shugu, over which a punitive squad was eventually sent to them, which deceived the meeting on Naruga, and, as a result, they killed everyone in her village. And she was sentenced to death because she refused to disclose the location of other villages. Based on this, our duo then stumbled upon a heap of shipwrecks that had arrived here earlier, where they encountered a semi-dead show covered in flowers. The monsters tore him in half. After that, our duo began to fight the monsters, during which Naruga explained that she didn't want to live because her entire family was killed because of her. But Tenzo was able to persuade her otherwise and instill in her the desire to continue living. And in the end, they managed to reach the island. And Tenzo finally learned that Naruga is a girl. Next, they decided to walk along the shore to find the very current that would allow them to leave the island. But suddenly Tensenjuji appeared, who initially thought that they had buried a whole heap of shovels in the forest, so they started running away from him. But then they caught up with them, and Tenza pierced through with his long-range attack. Tenza, in turn, when Judy wasn't distracted, angrily slashed his eyes, but they immediately healed. Penza even attempted to cut Tenzin into pieces to give them time to escape, but it didn't work. Suddenly, an edema appeared on Tenzin's head, the teacher of Tenzoi Shine, who, blinded by sound and smell, he sees everything around him. They started to run away from the chopped up Tenzin, where Sean, on their oath, rebuked his student because he relied only on his speed instead of using his head. He also mentioned that earlier he had Minya saying the criminal Gina, who tried to seduce and betray him, but he outwitted her and beheaded her. So he was already planning to leave the island but couldn't find a suitable current. And he also felt the presence of something he had never encountered before, and then he met Tenza and Narugaya. He immediately clarified why Tenza was protecting this criminal, as he was violating all the rules. But Tenzo explained that she was not a criminal but an innocent child. Tenzo believes she deserves a second chance, just as Sean once did with him. Tenzo now feels that Narugaya has potential. Also, once upon a time, when Tenjo met his teacher, Echelon liked Tenzo's answer because they were the words of a real man. In the end, he trusted Tenzo's choice and said that they now needed a plan in case of another encounter with the monster that appeared next to them the next second. If it weren't for Sean, he would have immediately cut down Narugaya's tendency, where, in the end, during this, Tenzin grabbed Cheyenne's neck. Outgoing Tenzo, realizing that the teacher couldn't escape, decided to fight this monster. He started a flow of blows, but the sand easily dodged them. And after that, the monster shot Tenzin at point-blank range with his long-range attacks, making 4 holes in him. The outgoing one began to show the history of Tensi, where he was born and raised in the slums. He was considered a social outcast, and to feed himself, he robbed people. And one day, he met Sean, who, seeing potential in him, saved his life. He also decided to make him his student. But Tenzo, as a true street dweller, wasn't used to taking orders, so he decided to leave. But Sean explained to him that he took him as a student so that Tenza could protect himself and those he cared about in the future. However, Tent still pondered that being a homeless dropout, he was incapable of becoming a samurai. Then, Sean told him that if he could manage to strike the teacher at any time, even just once, the kid could easily leave. Nevertheless, Tensor still decided to leave that place at night, where he encountered Ison at the exit. The kid thought Ison would stop him, but Ison merely offered to accompany him. They arrived at the cemetery, where Ison showed the kid the grave of the previous student, Shluna, who was very talented but lacked motivation to study, so he left. After some time, the teacher encountered the student during an execution. It turned out that this student, after leaving, resorted to robbery to survive, which led to his capture and death sentence. However, even after recognizing the student, Sean still fulfilled his duty, and since then, he had changed significantly. Prior to this, he had been deeply engrossed in his training, but now, for the sake of saving lives, he began to engage in the training of Isen students. All this led to the fact that if Tenzo were to leave now, he would likely end up in the place of that beheaded student. In connection with this, having listened to all this, Tenzo returned to Sean and asked him to take in the students, which Sean gladly did. Then we were taken back to the battlefield, where Tenzo realized that he had received mortal wounds, and to save the others, he began to expend his last strength so that the teacher's Nerigate could escape. Shlo understood this and, grabbing Nerigate, began to run away, while Tenzo sacrificed his life, not allowing Sean and Nerigate to escape, where he further explained to Nerigate that Tenzo gave his life for them to survive, and to not belittle his death, they must live, as they are not currently equal to that monster. However, Sean promised to fully avenge this monster. Then we were transported to Gabimaru, who, on the way, came across a bunch of trees resembling Ho, which were motionless. They were all praying. This did not stop Gabimaru, and he continued on his way, where Mei also joined him. As a result, our hero easily reached Brother Hirai, where, as he was about to open the gates, the same Tenshin Judy appeared behind him, who was shocked to encounter a person again. Based on this, he suggested to Gabimaru to leave here for the good, as for today he has already fulfilled the quota for catching people. From his words, Momobimaru understood that this was the same Tenshin, and through him, one could reach the elixir. Upon hearing this hint, he immediately attacked, where Gabimaru broke his arm, and then set his head on fire. But he recovered and slammed Gabimaru into a wall. Our hero withstood this blow, and they continued the fight, where Kodamara tried to find out where the elixir was in the process. While he fought Gabimaru, he was shocked because in his hundreds of years, he had never encountered such strong people. After contemplating, Gabimaru, pondering how to defeat the immortal, struck him in the abdomen, and Tenshin suffered damage. As a result, Judy, not turning into a woman, began to cast long-range attacks, with which he started bombarding Gabimaru. Gabimaru recalled that Mei had attacked him with similar attacks before, but he regained his focus. He then remembered his wife, and, upon reaching the monster, began exchanging blows with it. He started gaining momentum, and with his strikes, he began to outpace the enemy's regeneration. However, in response, the monster covered itself in flowers and transformed into a gigantic floral monster, at the center of which were two bodies. The monster then stunned Gabimaru with an electric discharge and relentlessly attacked him. As a result, Gabimaru began to hallucinate about his wife, and during a conversation with her, he realized what was happening. At that moment, the monster grabbed him and began to squeeze, prompting Gabimaru to instinctively use the 20th rule of Demon, where if he felt he was about to die, he instinctively had to expend his last strength to deal maximum damage to his opponent. With these actions, he managed to free himself. However, he could no longer continue to fight, and the monster was about to finish him off. But suddenly, Mei appeared and created a shield that protected her and Gabimaru from the monster's attack, and they flew down the cliff. It turned out that Tenshin knew Mei, after which he deflated and aged. At the same time, in the village, Sench revealed that he had missed Gabimaru, and Jiri realized that he had most likely gone to Hooray on his own. Roused, Izu revealed her intentions to follow him, but Izumi was against it, as it was not her style. Then Hoka intervened and said that Mei had also disappeared, and he believed that she had followed Gabimaru. Based on this, if they helped him find her, he would lead them to Hooray. Upon hearing this, Izu changed her mind, and they set off, with Hoka explaining on the way that there were 7 Tenshins who were currently holding meetings to discuss whether they preferred male or female bodies. Their conversation was interrupted by Reagan, and discussions began about the problems associated with the arrival of strong people on the island, in the depths of many Sashi knows. Tenshin Jotak began blaming Jidzin for everything, as he had used a form of Kishikai for the sake of some person. However, Rinyu calmed them down, as they were family, and he was their leader. Then Yellow told them that he also encountered people whom he crushed and threw into a pit to transform there. However, they also showed Tober and Tomu, who managed to escape from the pit. At the meeting, Jidzin bragged that in his fight, he had crushed his enemy, which rejuvenated and restored him. Then we returned to Koka, who explained to the others that according to legend, there was only one hermit Tenshin who somehow split himself into 7 parts. He began listing the Tenshins, namely Fujinjo, Te Shikatede, Fukuju-kan, Rutante-se, Niankin Kuimoji Koko, Jande, Taiken, and each of them had their roles. They governed the entire island. Hoka had heard this story. When he was still a child 1,000 years ago, their village was inhabited by long livers. The village prospered. However, gradually, they all began to turn into trees regardless of age. Hoka showed everyone his daughter transformed into a tree. Hoka considers Tenshins to be gods who are impossible to defeat. After that, we saw Gabimaru and Mei fallen, where Gabimaru, coming to his senses, realized that it was Mei who saved him. Immediately after, he saw Fujigan tell Susaya coming to them. Gabimaru, looking at him, realized that his center of gravity had shifted due to the absence of a hand. Then both criminals got into Sosaki Kogira in their heads and started virtually conducting their battle, where Gabimaru, to get to the elixir, decided to adapt to the situation. took the force of contextus, and suggested teaming up. Beauty and Gontel Susaya, convinced that Gabimaru was not joking, agreed to it because, in general, he is not interested in the elixir. He just wants to make his name immortal by inscribing it in history. Then they started sharing information, where Gabimaru told them about tension. At the same time, Mei regained consciousness. Gabimaru thanked her for her help and noticed that she had grown significantly and even started pronouncing words. Gabimaru tried to find out something about the power of tensions from her. She called this power Tao and said the spirit of the body, strong, weak tandem. However, no one could understand what she meant. Hoka explained to everyone that Tao is the energy that flows in all living things, and it is not Yang but immediately Yin. Immediately after, in front of Gabimaru and the others, the so-called Dosik appeared together with a bunch of sushi, which Fudy started cutting. He tried to show his strength to Mei, but she said, strong, no, need strong, weak techniques. Gabimaru's techniques were strong too. And meanwhile, Puti was dissecting where he realized that even outwardly similar and identical have different internal structures. After that, Dosik, who recognized Mei, grabbed her from Futi-Ai's shoulder, saying that they had been looking for her for a long time because she used to live in Hooray with tensions. However, seeing Mei's tears, Gabimaru instinctively stood up for her. Then another Dosik butterfly appeared. They began to summon tons of insects. Gontel Susaya took the Dosik butterfly, and Gabimaru began a fight with Dosik centipede. They casually explained that they needed them for Dao training. They explained that there are different types of training, but the top one is Boko Jutsu. For it, a partner is needed for the yin-yang cycle. In short, this is when they all just have sex with each other because Mei's origin is similar to tensions, but unlike them, her Tao flows only one force, and at the end, immediately two forces, and not Yang, so Mei was expelled by Renyu, and he left a scar on her back as his mark. After that, we were able to leave that place. Gabimaru, upon hearing all this, remembered his wife's scars and began to get angry, as if sensing the power of Tao. With a touch, we were able to help Gabimaru feel this power, and he continued the fight, using the power of Tao. Immediately, he knocked down two Dosiks with kicks. Gabimaru tried again to find out something about the elixir from Mei, but immediately after the question, he started to bleed from the nose and passed out. All of this was the consequence of using the power of Tao. After that, we were shown Shlo Neruge, where the teacher agreed to teach Neruge in memory of Dendi. It turns out that Sean had been seeing everything in the energy of Tao all this time, and they headed towards Hooray. Also, we were shown Tobu and Tomu, to whom one of the Dosiks also visited. He asked them to return back to the pit, but Tom started a fight. As a result, To began to evolve, his wounds healed, and he easily defeated Tosaka. Tom began to notice that something was changing within himself, as if he were losing his humanity. These were the consequences of using Tao. At the same time, Sagari and the others reached Hooray and met Tenzin there. Fukujo Kundor off Hoku's head, and Yuzuri Haji tried to escape, but she was caught. Tenzin said that the whole story about the deity and the purification of wooden souls was just the invention of their master 1,000 years ago. And the island is a place for experiments, and the people who come here are expendable. Then Tenzin summoned Kyosha, who grabbed Zurihu, who replaced herself with a tree and pierced Tenzin's neck. Tensenji used Kyosha and almost melted Zuriha. Tao returned, and Tenzin realized that she could see Tao, so he suggested her to engage in Boko Jutsu. Otherwise, he would make her do it. After that, he suddenly moved towards Sagiri and threw her against the wall, as he was only interested in this shinobi. The fight also involved cutting the set. And meanwhile, Eureka drank poison. Her body started to excrete corrosive slime, which she tried to melt Tenzin with, but he easily threw her into the set. Sagiri, meanwhile, realized that they needed to cut Tenzin in tandem, specifically at a spot near his navel. She also understood that Tenzin could anticipate their actions, so she unexpectedly threw her sword off stage, deceiving him, and then cut him in tandem. However, it didn't work as expected. Sagiri then felt the Tao and cut Tenzin's face, but it didn't go deep enough because it turns out that Sagiri's Tao is like poison to Tenzin's Fukujaku, emanating Tao. He applied the Nocturnal Pygmy, disappeared, and appeared next to Sagiri, but was stopped by Yuzuriha, whom he tried to attack, but she shielded herself with Senta's body. They developed a plan where Yuzuriha would hinder Tenzin's movement, and Sagiri would finish him off. With the help of Senta, who pierced Tenzin with a sword, Sagiri eventually cut him in tandem, and Tenzin collapsed to the ground. Then, our group started bandaging their wounds. Senta began sharing his dreams, recalling that since childhood, he always dreamed of being an artist, but the clan forced him to become an executioner. To somehow persuade himself and accept that he was an executioner, Senta became interested in religion, but it didn't help him. Senta also explained that he admires Eijurihai because in his eyes, she became the embodiment of freedom. At the same time, Sagiri remembered Gabimaru's words and said she understood Seta's words. While they were discussing all this, Fukujuku began to transform into a flower monster. He immediately shot Youve, whom Seta shielded with his body, and as a result, he was poisoned, flowers appearing on his body. Then, Tenzin attacked again, but Cheyenne appeared and cut his attacks. He also told Narugai to cut the flowers on Senta's body to slow down the spread of poison. After that, he began to solo fight the monster. And it turns out, his Dao, like Sagiri's, works like poison to Tenzin, and the others were thinking about how to save Senna. Youve began to stop his bleeding from the cuts, removing the flowers. However, despite his flawless performance in battle, Shan still got scratched, and flowers started appearing on his body, which he immediately cut off. He began to bleed heavily. Sagiri wanted to go help him, but she ran out of strength. Unexpectedly, Narugai restored her strength with a hug. It turns out she has such an ability. Furthermore, to protect themselves from poison, Youve covered them with a protective layer of slime. Together, they decided that Sagiri and Narugai would be the knife for the monster, and Senta would have to cut it. The girls managed to pin the monster to the ground, and when Senta jumped on it, he began to think about how to cut it. With his last strength, he shouted to cut the center of the flower, the so-called seed pouch. He was right, and he pierced it, defeating the monster. Tenzin thanked them because he had been waiting for his death for over 1,000 years. Liquid flowed out of him, and flowers grew everywhere. Now the task was to save the fatally wounded Shan and Senna. Youve said that she could only stop the bleeding of one, and she believed they should save Shan. However, Sagiri suggested dividing the mass to try to save both, but Youve was against it because she wanted to leave a mother for herself. She told Senta not to cling to this life because he finally had a chance to rest fully. She told him that he was free to think about anything now. After that, Senna passed away, and they buried him. Then, not all together, they went into the corridor and climbed the nearest building, where there was everything to spend the night. They began to discuss their survival plan, and also discuss the Dao energy, where its use gives beads, but it must be used carefully because Dao is life energy, and jokes are bad. Also, in the meantime, Youre, they have a problem with the elixir of immortality, which as it does not exist, but there are similarities, and she is sure that Siginat will not accept the fact that the elixir does not exist, because according to the Tensins, if an ordinary person drinks Tantu, he will become like Hoka. Sagiri reminded that Gabimaru said that Denin in his village was immortal, but Youve also said that maybe it's all an illusion because from childhood, shinobi are brainwashed, showing children various horrors. This practice is common in many villages, and maybe even Gabimaru's wife is also an illusion because what's the point of marrying such a young shinobi? She thinks that if they couldn't hold him with fear, they came up with motivation for him to do his job well. And again, she thinks that Gabimaru's wife doesn't exist. Meanwhile, Gabimaru regained consciousness, and it turns out that he lost his memory due to the use of Dao. He remembers his name, but everything else that happened to him, including his wife, he forgot. We also saw this because Gabimaru's head lacked Dao. Based on the situation, Gabimaru understood that overall, everyone in front of him doesn't seem to pose a threat to him. He decided to observe and gather information. Also, towards the end, we were shown the whole Gon Simon, where the shogunate came to him to organize another expedition to the island. And with that, the first season came to an end. I thank everyone for watching. See you in the next video.